They never truly hated you. What they feared was your potential, the kind that doesn't just rise, but returns, stronger, wiser, sharper. You were never broken, just silenced, pushed into shadows, not because you were weak, but because your presence was too loud, too real, too alive. They watched you fall, not with satisfaction, but with hope that you'd stay there. But you didn't. You disappeared to rebuild, not retreat. And now your comeback isn't just a moment. It's a warning. Every breath you take now unsettles them. Every step forward shakes their illusions, because they know the person you used to be is gone, and what stands in your place is everything they prayed would never awaken again. Your silence was power. Your return, that's the reckoning. They tried to bury you because they knew you were a seed. They didn't walk away because you were weak. They walked away because they saw what was coming. You see, people don't fear noise. They fear potential. Quiet, consistent, unshakable potential. The kind that grows in silence, matures in shadows, and erupts when least expected. They didn't try to break you out of hate. They tried to bury you out of fear, but they forgot. Seeds grow when buried. They mistook your stillness for surrender. They called your isolation defeat. But you weren't hiding, you were healing, you were rooting. While they laughed at your silence, you were gathering strength. While they celebrated your downfall, you were building depth. They thought the absence of your voice meant the end of your story, but it was the beginning of a new chapter they weren't ready to read. And now the ground is shaking, not because you're loud, but because you're rising, not because you're angry, but because you're focused. The very people who pushed you down are now watching in discomfort as you grow beyond what they ever imagined. You don't fit their version of you anymore. You've outgrown their boxes, and that alone terrifies them, because if you could rise after that pain, after that betrayal, after that silence, they know they have no excuse. You are not just a person coming back. You are a living mirror, reflecting what they tried to suppress in themselves, and that reflection burns. They tried to erase you because they saw you becoming something they couldn't control. They called you dramatic when you were only honest. They called you weak when you were simply wounded. But you turned that wound into wisdom, and now they can't look away. Every move you make now forces them to face what they tried to hide. You survived what was meant to break you, and you did it without screaming, without begging, without seeking vengeance. You let the silence speak, and now the silence is over. The comeback has begun, and they fear it, not because you're returning angry, but because you're returning unshakable, because they know once a seed breaks through the dirt, nothing can stop its growth. Not their opinions, not their gossip, not their fear. You were never buried to disappear. You were buried so you could grow, and now that you're blooming, they know it's already too late. Your absence gave them power. Your return destroys the illusion. They flourished when you were gone, not because they grew, but because your presence was no longer there to reveal the truth. Your absence wasn't just a quiet season. It was a stage they used to rewrite the script. They twisted your silence into weakness, your withdrawal into guilt, your healing into shame. While you were rebuilding, they were performing, acting stronger, louder, more in control. But it was all borrowed power, dressed up in false confidence. They built their version of events in your absence because they assumed you would never return to tell your side. But now, your return is not just inconvenient. It's dangerous to their illusion, because you bring back something they can't counterfeit: truth. The truth of who you were, the truth of what really happened, the truth of how much you've grown. They didn't want you to come back stronger. They wanted you to stay broken, so they could keep their story neat and unchallenged. But your presence interrupts the show. You don't even need to speak loudly. Your calmness says it all. Your evolution speaks volumes. You no longer seek validation from the same crowd that enjoyed your absence. And that's what unravels them, because they depended on your silence to build their stage, and now that you're back, the spotlight isn't on them anymore, it's on the truth. You returning doesn't just shake their comfort, it exposes how much of their confidence was built on your stillness. It wasn't power they held, it was a vacuum, And now the real energy, the real depth, the real strength has walked back into the room, and they don't know where to stand. They thought time would erase your fire. But all it did was refine it. Your return isn't loud. It's not petty. It's powerful because it's controlled. It's powerful because you have no interest in revenge. Only truth, and truth, unlike noise, lingers. You don't need to prove anything. Your presence undoes their illusion effortlessly. They wanted the world to think you gave up, that you disappeared. But now the world sees that you were only preparing. And while they were performing in your absence, you were becoming undeniable. You're not here to argue. You're not here to reclaim a seat at their table. You've built your own, and your return isn't about being seen. It's about being remembered. Because when you rise again, the illusion fades. And what's left is something they can't manage, can't mock, and can't manipulate. You, the real you. And that's what they fear the most. Your growth exposes their stagnation. They were comfortable with who you used to be, because your struggles made them feel superior, your wounds gave them power, and your confusion was their safety net. They stood tall next to you only because you were on your knees, but now you've risen, not with noise, not with drama, but with clarity, and that clarity is blinding to those who chose comfort over growth. They watched you fall, but what unsettles them now is watching you rise without asking for their help, their permission, or their applause. Your growth isn't just about success, it's about silence. You don't announce yourself, yet your presence speaks volumes. You no longer match their rhythm because you've found your own, and that shift, that distance, it exposes something they don't want to face. They never moved. While you were evolving, they stayed stagnant, spinning in the same circles, clinging to the same narratives, blaming everyone but themselves. You outgrew not just the situation, but the version of yourself they depended on. You grew into someone they can't understand anymore, and that's what they fear. Because now, every room you walk into reminds them of the time they wasted. Every boundary you set reminds them of the lines they crossed. Every dream you chase now casts a shadow over the excuses they've used to stand still. They no longer see you as relatable, because you've become a mirror reflecting what they could have been if they'd chosen courage over comfort. You no longer need to argue, to explain, to defend. Your energy has changed, your silence has depth, and your peace, it's intimidating because it's the kind that doesn't flinch. They don't miss the old you. They miss the version of you they could control, but you've outgrown their grasp. And in doing so, you've exposed the very thing they tried to hide with pride, with gossip, with noise. The fact that they're still in the same place, just louder about it. Growth has a way of shaking things up, not by force, but by contrast. You didn't set out to make them uncomfortable, but your light makes their shadows harder to ignore. And now the distance between who you are and who they pretend to be is undeniable. Your journey doesn't need to be explained to those who never had the courage to take their own. Let them watch, let them whisper, let them pretend nothing's changed. Because deep down they know your growth has drawn a line that can't be erased. You didn't just move forward, you moved beyond, and that's something they never prepared for. You know what they did, and you forgave silently. You never forgot. Not the betrayal, not the words spoken behind your back, not the way they turned away when you needed them the most, but you didn't scream, you didn't expose them, you didn't announce your pain to the world. You took every wound and turned it into wisdom. You carried the truth in silence, not because you were weak, but because you were wise, because you understood something they didn't. Some things are too sacred to waste on vengeance. You saw it all. The lies, the manipulation, the twisted games played in the dark while pretending innocence in the light, and yet you didn't strike back. That's what terrifies them now. Not what you said, but what you never said. The fact that you moved forward with calmness instead of chaos. That you could have burned it all down, but chose instead to walk away and rebuild yourself. They know you know, and every day that truth hangs in the air like a quiet storm they can't escape. Your silence became louder than any argument, because silence from someone who knows is not emptiness. its judgment, its memory, its strength disguised as stillness. They expected rage, they expected a reaction. What they got was distance, and that distance is louder than fire. You didn't forgive because they deserved it. You forgave because you deserved peace. You let go, not to erase the past, but to free yourself from being trapped in it. And now, your forgiveness has become the heaviest thing they carry, because they know you could have destroyed them, but you didn't. And now, every time they look at you, they are reminded of who they were and who they still are. You didn't need to prove anything. Your grace did what their guilt never could. It exposed the truth without you saying a word. That's why they fear your presence. That's why they speak your name in hesitation. Because you walk with the calm of someone who has already faced the worst and survived it without bitterness. You forgave them silently, and that silence echoes. It lingers. It reminds them that justice sometimes looks like distance. That peace sometimes looks like disappearing without a fight. And healing, it sometimes looks like never needing to explain yourself again. You hold no grudges, but you also hold no doors open anymore. You didn't seek revenge. You became unreachable, and that is the loudest response of all. You are proof that light survives darkness. You didn't just survive, you returned glowing, and that glow didn't come from ease or comfort. It came from fire, from walking through nights so dark that even your own reflection felt like a stranger, from holding yourself together in silence when everything around you fell apart. You are not just a comeback story. You are the living proof that light doesn't die in darkness. It learns to breathe in it. You were surrounded by silence, by doubt, by people who waited for you to break. And yet here you are standing, unshaken, not because nothing touched you, but because you refused to let it define you. That's what they fear. Not your strength alone, but the fact that you built that strength in a place they assumed would destroy you. They don't understand how you kept going when the world gave you every reason to quit. They don't understand how your heart still opens, how your eyes still carry warmth after everything you've been through. But that's what separates you. You didn't let the darkness turn you bitter. You let it teach you, shape you, refine you, and now your light has depth. It's not a show. It's not attention. It's real, and real light unnerves those who have learned to live in shadows. You're not just shining. You're reminding everyone watching that resilience is not loud. It's not flashy. Sometimes it's just the quiet strength of showing up again, scarred but still standing. You become the symbol of everything they said couldn't happen, of rising after failure, of forgiving after betrayal, of dreaming after disappointment. And that kind of light, it doesn't just brighten rooms, it reveals truth. Your energy makes people uncomfortable not because it's aggressive, but because it's honest, it's earned, and it cannot be faked. The ones who doubted you, who dismissed you, who secretly hoped you'd fade away, they now see a light they can't dim, a fire they can't smother. They see someone who walked through the storm without an umbrella and still came out dry, because your light isn't borrowed. It was built in the places they never dared to go. It's easy to smile when things are perfect, but you smiled through ruins. You created warmth in winters that should have frozen you. You are not here to prove anyone wrong. You are here to live in full bloom, not in spite of the darkness, but because of it. And that light you carry now, it scares them, because it tells the world a truth many want to silence. Light always finds a way back.